So for my paper and presentation, I examined demographic changes and the effects that those have on developing countries. And in this presentation, we will analyze the effects of demographic change on economic growth, first describing the main ways how demographic change impacts economic outcomes, estimating the effects of changes on the share of working age population on GDP growth and poverty, changes in the share of working age population and how it will be a measure of demographic change, and finally the estimates that are on average an increase in the share of working age population and how that can benefit countries by boosting per capita growth. So the changing of population age structures in developing countries are beginning to shape the trajectory of development, which can and will bring about new opportunities and challenges for these developing countries. While aging has been a concern for upper, middle, and high-income countries, rapid population growth could expand the economies of some of the most poverty-stricken countries around the world. These changes in the working class shares of the population have the potential to boost sustainable growth as well as reduce poverty in the future. Many developing countries, especially in sub-Saharan Africa and southern countries in Asia, are expected to see continued growth in the proportion of working age people, even as more middle class and high income countries see a general decline. Results suggest that an increase in 1% in the working age population could see a possible increase in GDP per capita growth by nearly 1.5%. These results can also be higher if the working age population is paired years in education in an educational institution and grows larger as the average years of schooling does the same. Also, an increase of 1% in the share of working age population could be associated with an increase in 0.8% in savings as a share of GDP, with declining dependency ratios paired with a lower share of children in the population, also tend to boost savings and investment. And finally, an increase in 1% in the working age population could be associated with a decrease of about 0.76% in the poverty rate as well. So when we look at demographic dividends, they are defined as growth in an economy that is a result of a change in the age structure of a country's population. This is a direct and immediate consequence of the rise in the working age share of the population. If a larger share of the population is working, average standards of living will be higher. The most interesting examples of this story to date is of East Asia that occurred over the span of 5 to 15 years during the 1950s and 60s. And during this time, the East Asian countries invested heavily in their youth and expanded access to family planning, which allowed people to start families later or have fewer children. According to the UNFPA, the Republic of Korea saw its GDP per capita grow 2,200% between 1950 and 2008. More generally, growth in the working age share is associated with higher per capita income growth. If we look at figure 3, the working age population share increased across all groups of countries between 1950 and 2010. Thus, despite the evidence of a positive association between an increase in the share of working age population and GDP per capita growth, there are very few cases of countries with a shrinking working age population share over this period. High-income countries have on average a larger share of the working age population, which peaks around 67% for Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development countries between 2000 and 2010. At the same time, the working age population share in low-income economies is still below the levels observed even in upper middle-income countries before the 1980s. And in Table 3, that shows that not only has the share of working age population been larger in higher income countries, but also the human capital has been significantly higher as well. Among Eastern Asian and Pacific countries, and those classified as upper middle income, there was a combination of rapid increase in share of the working age population and improvements in education based on years of schooling. For low income countries, most of them in the South Asia and sub-Saharan African regions, the improvements in years of schooling can still be seen well below the average for other groups of countries. And in Table 4, that that will show the average income per capita across regions and income groups across 1950 to 2015. So we take a look at the Eastern, um, Asian and Pacific countries. You can see a much larger growth between 1950 and 2010 when we compare that to the sub-Saharan African group at the very bottom of table 4 here. There's just a much, and that could be contributed to the case that I discussed earlier in the presentation. But based on these results, demographic transition may provide an important opportunity for countries to boost their welfare by increasing per capita GDP growth and reducing the poverty rate. This may provide opportunities, particularly for countries in sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia that expect an increase in the share of working age population as they continue to undergo demographic transition and as their fertility rates continue to fall. The results also suggest a positive association on the interaction between changes in the share of working age population and years of schooling with GDP per capita growth. These results may not provide enough influence on the effects of reduction in the share of working age population in aging countries. Finally, here are my references. Thanks for listening to my presentation.